Paladins rejoice! Seal Twisting is finally here and they are going to have a ton more damage moving on. Class tuning has now been announced coming for this week in Season of Discovery Phase 3, as well as some updates just letting us know that some other classes are on the radar. So let's break it down really quickly because I'm really sick right now. So we're just going to try to do this quickly and then I'm going to go back to laying down. Starting off with Boomkins getting a little bit of a buff. Now, Boomkins, the talent that you have to get to grab Omen of Clarity, which would give you kind of some free cast of any of your abilities that cost no mana. Well, you have to get this talent called Natural Weapons that was giving you 10% extra damage only to physical damage. It was a wasted talent point for Boomkins and an amazing one for Feral Druids, but that is now being buffed to 10% flat damage. So Boomkins just from this alone are getting 10% flat damage increase because they will get this talent either way. They also had a buff to the Gale Winds rune. This is the rune that makes your Hurricane do 100% extra damage and it costs a little bit less mana. It was 20% less mana initially. Now that has been buffed to 60% less mana and Hurricane has no CD. Hopefully this means Boomkins will actually have a decent amount of AoE damage, but it won't really be enough to make Boomkins incredibly strong. On the same note, if you were to look at some of the weaker performing classes in the game, the worst two are Boomkins and Shadow Priest. So both of these classes need a buff and Blizzard did go in and give Boomkins that 10% buff. They also went in and buffed all of the damage done by Shadow Priest while in Shadow form by another 10%. This means that Shadow Priest in PvP that were double dotting you and you were instantly dead, those dots got stronger. It was a flat buff and they're probably going to look to do some more reworks because just having the damage increase, just a flat damage increase, doesn't really help fix some of the issues with the class inherently. Next up is Rogues. Rogues basically have been completely forced to play Mutilate, to play daggers, basically ever since they buffed Mutilate, and it is so powerful that you never go swords, maces, fist weapons, anything for Saber Slash to be a viable spec. You can't even go into the combat tree, which is originally what Rogues all were playing in OG Classic. Well, they've actually looked at Saber Slash and made this get buffed in a few different ways. First of all, it was a debuff that would stack a bleed up to 3 times on the target. Now that will stack up to 5 times. The Saber Slash bleed also increases the damage taken by all of the next Saber Slashes and Sinister Strikes by 15%. So once you use it once, you will then have a 15% buff to the damage of it. And the bleed itself was actually nerfed a little bit. So it was doing 5% of the Rogue's attack power as a bleed. Now it is down to 3%, but it stacks up 2 more times. So it now adds up to the same amount. Just you have to press Saber Slash 2 more times to get to that attack power scaling. Either way, hopefully this does bring Rogues a little bit more online to no longer have to play purely a dagger specialization, but we will see. I would assume Simon Az is running some numbers to let people know how this is going to affect the class. And you might have seen Blizzard asking for feedback from players on how to improve some of the underperforming classes. If you have valid feedback that instead of just saying buff this, nerf this, if it was going to actually kind of increase the play style or just utilize how the class can play better. So when this happened, and you can find this over on Twitter or over on Wowhead, basically Blizzard acknowledges that Shadow Priests are incredibly oppressive in PvP, but they are very weak in PvE. Survival Hunters are a spec of hunters that literally is just non-existent. You don't get to play survival. You're just a BM hunter if you're a melee hunter. Holy Paladins, something they definitely let down on a little bit, and they're looking to make Holy Paladins great again, as well as Sword Rogues, which we saw with the changes today. Probably the biggest frustrating one for most people seeing things is that Warriors Rage generation is just absolutely unreal, making them by far the strongest class in the game as you scale up better and better, and they will continue to scale indefinitely, meaning they can't add fun runes to the class if they actually want to have Warriors not be just the absolute be all end all gods of the game. So they're trying to figure out things like this for the future, but there was a massive change to Paladins today. Before saying that, there even was a change to Shamans. The Mental Dexterity rune for Shamans, basically the one that required you to hit with a melee attack to increase your actual spell damage and spell power, and those melee attacks also increase your attack power. This rune, which is incredibly powerful and was basically being used by all versions of shamans, has seen a nerf or a readjustment. Basically, it's not that dealing damage with all of your melee attacks will cause the proc to happen. Now this will only proc off of Storm Strike and Lava Lash. This means that if you are trying to play something like an elemental shaman, you most likely won't be using the mental dexterity rune. Instead, you're now going to use the burn rune most likely, which actually is upped from hitting 3 targets with your flame shock to now hitting 5 targets with your flame shock. That also hits for 100% more damage. And on top of that, it will increase the duration of burn on all of those targets up to 6 seconds. So Ellie Shaman's getting a lot more AoE damage, and this will also have a lot more synergies with some of their other runes. These changes mostly affect the playstyle of shamans to have them work in the ways that Blizzard originally intended and allow elemental shamans to be elemental casters instead of having to melee in between multiple casts. So this is going to be a pretty nice change for shamans themselves. But again, the massive change here is gonna be for Retribution Paladins. Paladins can absolutely rejoice today as we have now received seal twisting to their Seal of Martyrdom. This is a video from SVAN a few months ago explaining seal twisting, why it's good, why it should be more of a thing, but let's break down exactly what the changes are to the Paladin. First, Seal of Righteousness, which you're gonna see him go in with initially. Now the damage from Seal of Righteousness can crit. Also, your Crusader Strike ability, which you're using every 6 seconds, maybe it's 4 seconds right now, but this will refresh your judgments on the target, meaning that paladins will have to worry less about management of any of their judgments on the target and focus more on their rotation. And Seal of Martyrdom, like I said, can now twist with other seals, including Seal of Command. So not only is righteousness getting buffed, not only are you having never to really worry about your judgments anymore, but you also now can seal twist, which might be incredibly powerful. Basically, what this is doing is quickly switching between which seal you're using to be able to hit with multiple attacks in basically similarly the same global. Now, it also means that you will be watching like a swing timer a lot of the time now. You'll probably see paladins now with like a gigantic weak aura that is super ugly for their swing timers, but I mean, it is what it is. It adds a skill expression to the game to paladins. It also massively buffs their DPS, hopefully, which should make them a lot more viable within the raids, making them a little bit more competitive with shamans, which are obviously one of the most powerful classes in the game right now. Now, Blizzard did mention that this could be too powerful and that there might be other hotfixes or adjustments that come in the future, depending on how this all plays out. But for the most part, these are some pretty solid changes, trying to buff a lot of the classes and not really focus, so far at least, on nerfing any of the classes, but kind of trying to help some of the playstyles that aren't really performing well. At the bottom of the post, they also said that they're carefully planning more adjustments to the classes I mentioned earlier, but to hunters, mages, shamans, and warlocks in some very soon future updates. So we can expect to see some adjustments to those classes coming very soon. And this just continues to show that Season of Discovery is always evolving, and most of the class changes will most likely happen early-ish on in the phase, because they do want to then start planning for the next phase, or level 60, which will bring a lot more things online. So if we don't see too many class changes to some of the underperforming specializations, we can probably, or hopefully, anticipate that they get brought up in power level moving forward. Anyways, guys, I hope you're all excited and enjoying phase 3 like I am. I will see you all on the next one. I'm gonna go lay down. All right, love you guys.